There's a specific kind of quiet that feels wrong. Not peaceful, not still. Wrong. Like the silence itself is holding its breath. I felt that kind of quiet on the third night. And by then, I already knew I wasn't alone in those woods. I just didn't know how long he'd been there. I'm a high school teacher. English. 11th grade. I've been doing it for 9 years, and every October, after midterm grading, I feel the same thing. A specific, bone-deep exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. My wife had taken our daughter to visit her mother in Portland for 10 days. The timing worked out well enough that I decided to use the time differently this year. I'd rented the cabin through a private listing. Small place. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. A kitchen barely large enough to turn around in. And a main room with a wood stove and 2 windows facing the tree line. It sat in the mountains of rural North Carolina, about 50 minutes from the nearest town. The owner's name was Dennis. He was a retired contractor, calm and practical on the phone. He told me the cabin was built in 2009, had a new roof, and the well water was tested annually. Peaceful out there, he said. No traffic. No neighbors within 2 miles. That was the selling point for me. I arrived on a Sunday, unloaded my car, set up my laptop and some books on the kitchen table, and spent the rest of the afternoon reading on the porch. The forest was dense, mostly pine and oak, with a shallow creek about 100 yards north that I could hear faintly when the wind dropped. I felt fine. Better than fine. I felt like myself again. That lasted about 2 days. The first thing I noticed was the truck. Tuesday morning, I drove into town for coffee and a few extra groceries. On the way back, about a mile from the cabin's turnoff, a dark green pickup was parked on the gravel shoulder. No hazard lights, no flat tire, no one visible inside. It was just sitting there, engine off, facing the direction of the cabin. I slowed as I passed. The cab appeared empty. I kept driving. It's hunting season in October. Guys park on roadsides all the time. I didn't give it another serious thought until I saw the same truck parked in the same spot on my way out Wednesday morning. Same position, same angle, same direction. I stopped this time. Got out, walked to the driver's window. Empty cab. No coffee cups, no gear, no hunting vest. Just an empty truck parked on a remote road, 2 days in a row. I wrote down the partial plate number in my phone. I don't know exactly why. That afternoon, back at the cabin, I was making coffee when I had the sudden, irrational feeling that I was being watched. I stood at the kitchen window and looked at the tree line. Nothing moved. But the feeling didn't leave. Wednesday night was when the sound started. I'd gone to bed around 10:30. The wood stove had died down, and the cabin had cooled slightly, the way it always did by late evening. I was half asleep when I heard it, a branch snapping, not the random, scattered kind you hear when wind moves through trees. One clean snap, then a pause, then another. Footfalls. I lay completely still. Animals move erratically. They don't pause and continue at a measured pace. This paused, and continued, and stopped somewhere close to the north wall of the cabin. I waited a full 10 minutes before I moved. I got up slowly, crossed to the window, and stood to the side of it, out of the light. I saw nothing in the darkness outside. But something felt different about the stillness. I checked the front door. Dead bolted. The back door in the kitchen, a second lock I'd almost forgotten, was also turned. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep. Thursday morning I told myself what anyone would tell themselves. Deer. Maybe a black bear. The woods were full of both. I hiked for a couple of hours, mostly to feel like I still had normal control over my own day, and when I came back I washed up and made lunch. It was when I was drying my hands that I noticed it. The small rag rug in front of the kitchen sink was moved. Not dramatically, maybe 6 inches to the left. I stood there, looking at it for longer than made sense. I hadn't moved it. I'd used that rug every morning, and it had sat in the same position, slightly crooked, angled toward the back door since I'd arrived. Now it was straight, and shifted. I looked at the back door. Locked. Deadbolt in place. No sign of tampering. But the back door led to a small utility porch, and the utility porch had a second outer door. One with only a simple knob lock. I'd noticed it on arrival and assumed it locked automatically. I went outside and checked. The outer door of the utility porch was not locked. It had a small interior button on the knob that had to be pressed and twisted to engage the lock. It was not engaged. I stood in the porch between the outer door and the inner deadbolted door, and I thought about the rug. If someone had come in through the outer door, they would have stood in this porch. They could not have gotten past the deadbolt. But they could have stood here, in this exact spot. Trying it, I called Dennis. I told him the outer porch door wasn't locking properly and asked if the inner deadbolt had ever been tampered with. There was a brief pause. "It should be fine," he said. "I had a tenant complain about the outer door knob last fall. Just push it firmly before you turn the button." That was a reasonable answer. I told myself that was a reasonable answer. That night I pushed a wooden chair under the inner deadbolt anyway. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop and tried to grade papers for 2 hours. At 11:48 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Nothing. No static, no breathing, just the open, hollow sound of a connected call. I said hello twice. The call ended after 11 seconds. I stared at my phone. Wrong number. At 12:20 a.m., the same unknown number called again. I didn't answer. It rang 8 times. Then stopped. I did not sleep in the bedroom that night. I moved to the couch facing the front door, with the kitchen knife from the wooden block on the coffee table beside me. Friday started quiet. I made a decision around noon. I was going to leave Saturday morning, 1 day early. I wasn't going to tell myself it was fear. I was just going to say I'd gotten what I needed and was ready to go home. That's the version I built in my head. Friday afternoon, around 4 p.m., the power blinked. Once. A single blink. Then, held. I stood in the kitchen and looked out the back window at the utility porch. The outer door was open. Wide open. I had locked it myself that morning, pressed the button, tested it. It was open. I picked up the knife from the counter. I walked slowly to the back door and turned the deadbolt. I opened the inner door carefully. The utility porch was empty. The outer door swung slightly in the wind. I stepped out, looked left and right. The tree line was maybe 30 feet from the back porch. The light was failing. I saw movement. Not dramatic, just a shape, far enough back in the trees that I couldn't define it. Human in height, human in proportion, standing completely still between 2 thick pines. I stared. It didn't move. Neither did I. Then the shape stepped slowly back into the deeper dark of the woods. One deliberate step, and it was gone. I went back inside, locked both doors, and called 911. The deputy arrived in 40 minutes. He was professional and unhurried. Walked the tree line with his light. Found nothing he said was conclusive. "Deer hunters push into private land this time of year," he said. He was standing still, I said, watching the cabin. "Trespassers don't always know they're on private land." He wrote up a report. He told me to call again if anything else happened, and he'd do a drive-by in the night. I thanked him. He left. I didn't sleep again Friday night. At 2:17 a.m., the deputy's cruiser came slowly down the road. The headlights crossed the front window. He paused outside for a minute, then continued on. At 3:40 a.m., I heard footsteps on the front porch. Slow. Measured. They moved from the front door to the left to the window and stopped. I was already sitting upright in the dark, one hand on the knife, one hand on my phone. I dialed 911 and pressed call but didn't raise the phone to my ear. The window screen made a tiny sound, a slight pop along one edge. I stood up. The screen was being lifted. I put the phone to my ear and spoke at normal volume. "I'm on the phone with the police right now," I said clearly. "They have a car on this road. I can see the cabin from the outside and you can't see in. I need you to understand that. None of that was fully true. But most of it was." The footsteps paused. A voice on the porch said something low. Not to me, almost to himself. One word. I couldn't hear it clearly. The footsteps moved back across the porch, down the 2 porch steps, into gravel, and then the crunch of steps moving away. The dispatcher was on the line asking for my situation. I told them. The deputy was back in 8 minutes. He searched the property with a second officer who'd arrived behind him. No one was found. But at the base of the front porch they found a knife. Not one of mine. A fixed blade hunting knife, about 7 inches. Laid in the gravel. Not dropped, the deputy said. Placed. Blade facing the porch steps. He bagged it without much expression. "Could have been left by anyone," he said. He said it in the tone of someone who knew that wasn't quite true. I left at 5:30 in the morning. I didn't pack carefully. I just loaded what mattered and drove. The green pickup was not on the shoulder. The road was empty. I called Dennis from the car and told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The tenant before you. She left a day early, too. What happened?" Another pause. "She said she heard someone on the porch." He hadn't mentioned it when I rented the place. I didn't ask him why. I already knew the answer people give themselves when they want something not to be a pattern. The police followed up twice. The knife had no prints. The plate I'd written down was registered to a vehicle that had been reported stolen 2 months earlier and never recovered. No suspect was identified. No charges were filed. I've been home for 6 weeks. My wife knows most of it, not all of it. I had the locks on our house changed the week I got back. Motion lights on both sides of the property. A camera on the front door. Most nights I'm fine, but sometimes, when the house is quiet and my wife and daughter are asleep, I think about what he said on the porch. That single low word. I've replayed it hundreds of times. Last week I was almost certain I finally understood it. I think he said a name. And I think it was mine. I don't know how he would have known it. I've thought about that every night since. A rented cabin. A private list, a stranger in the woods, who apparently knew who was staying there. I haven't found an explanation that fully holds. And I've stopped believing I'm going to.